Okay, let's put this just here. All right, let me know when you guys can hear me. Down the first timestamp. Get this ready here. You do, in all caps. All right, well, as you guys can tell, the studio is in no way done, but this is the first live stream from the new studio from Nashville. Bear with me as I set everything up. I'm mostly done unpacking most things, but I'm still kind of deciding some things, where to put other things. I mean, like, for example, if you look behind me now, I'm not sure the exact camera use angles I will use for each thing, but there's over here going to be large desks that go all the way down, light strips going down, multiple benchmarking stations that I can walk around up here and test different things at the same time. Eventually, if we get enough funding, I would even do things where you have like different cameras I can switch to while doing a live stream. Like, well, here's a test I'm doing right. So as you can see, this is not in a living room anymore. This has its own room, and the camera just went out of focus for no reason. Isn't that always fun when that happens, everybody? But yeah, so it seems like everything's working well. It's good I didn't have to do a live stream from the temporary house you saw me do the DG2 video, and most videos in April from, because that house's internet was just terrible. This is far better internet. Yeah, I can stand up in here. But let's get into it. This is Loose Ends. This is covering the gaming hardware, just gaming in general, news from this month, any lingering thoughts I have about it, and then transitioning into some, of course, patron reader mails and then live chat. So save the chat questions for about 10-15 minutes from now. Get ready to do them. There is a limit to how often you can ask questions. So if you want a tip for the question, save it for about 10 minutes from now, and then we'll get into it. Yeah. When it comes to things from this month, I think I would just say that in general, can we all agree it was kind of a boring... someone in the chat says, what do you think about the Sapphire Rapids 72 core leak? Are you talking about the leak I put out a year ago? Again, which is perfect. It's actually funny. I just read that question from Eddie R in the live chat, like the Sapphire Rapids things. Guys, we've had pictures of the 4-tile Sapphire Rapids from other people for months. We've known about 72 cores, HBM, from me for a year. This isn't news. There hasn't been that much truly new things this month. If you ask me, even the 3080 Ti, guys, we knew what the we knew what the 3080 Ti was before Ampere even launched. And that's unfortunate because I think some people have just straight up made up things about Zen 3 Plus. I've been speculating kind of loosely. Anytime someone would ask me in reader mail on Broken Silicon, I guess I would say, like, well, I'm not looking into Zen 3 Plus yet, but it could only be one of these three things anyways. And it's unfortunate that I didn't dig into Zen 3 Plus way sooner, because if I would have done the investigation a month ago, I just did, I would have quickly come to the same conclusion I just did now, that, oh, people are making up stuff about Zen 3 Plus. And I don't really blame the rumor websites that much, because it's their job to get clicks, but then they're just regurgitating it over and over because they need clicks, because there's not a lot of news. Sapphire Rapids stuff from this month isn't new. 3080 Ti news isn't new. We've known about the 30 Ti for months. So I unfortunately think some people made up stuff about Zen 3 Plus, and then it was just covered because it's a thing to get clicks on. And it's unfortunate that happened. Truly the most interesting thing from this month, if I can be honest, is the DG2 leak, where you saw first pictures of test samples for DG2 prototypes. I confirmed performance, release window, pricing, features. Besides DG2, that's about it. Even Van Gogh, we've probably known most about for a while. I just took the time, because there wasn't other news, to confirm what I know about Van Gogh, which is to say, I'm not sure Van Gogh's coming out either, by the way. But it was definitely a real thing, which I will say again, Warhol is a real code name. I will say that, but I don't think, not 100% sure, but I just don't think it made it past the planning phase, right? Or, and here's the important caveat, if it does, it's not coming out soon, guys. It's that if Warhol were to come out, I would say that means it's coming out at the end of this year at the soonest, and Zen 4 has been delayed. But I don't think that's what's going on. I don't. Now, Rembrandt could be Zen 3 Plus. There's plenty of evidence it could be, but that's it. I think AMD scrapped their plans for some other plus for the other incarnations because they just don't need it, and they need to focus on Zen 4. And they probably came to the conclusion it wouldn't be good enough on desktop, if we're being entirely honest. See some your mom's house references. But yeah, I mean, besides that, you know, I confirmed Lunar Lake IPC, or I gave you guys a ballpark. I'm not willing to talk about everything I know about Lunar Lake yet, right? It's almost pointless this early on. It's not coming out for like 3 years. So why talk about an architecture that could have fundamental changes to it before then? But I mean, listen to the last Broken Silicon, guys. I confirmed what you should expect from Lunar Lake, which is to say like doubling of IPC compared to what we have now, which is, or more, which is incredible. And it really, and again, for the people that say that's unbelievable, it's like, well, what if it comes out in 4 years? You know, think about what AMD is doing. Intel pretty much needs to do that to make a splash. Anyways, but yeah, so that's the things from this month. Outside of that, before I move to the live questions, I would just say a small summarizing thing. And that's something I feel like I have to say. Something I feel like I have to say at the end of this month is just when I looked at the comments for my debunking AMD leaks thing, which, by the way, guys, the 4700S is not an Xbox die. That's another thing that was just made up out of thin air about some Chinese motherboard with GDR6. It's not an Xbox die. And in fact, I would say it's probably not a PlayStation die, almost assuredly as well, because Sony doesn't like people using their SoCs for other things. They see it as a security vector problem, right? So if it's not Xbox and PlayStation, it's probably some other console, right? For the Chinese market, there's tons of semi-custom APUs out there. Yeah, I mean, anyways, though, I just cut myself off. The summarizing theme for this month, I would just say, is that last video I did debunking the 4700S stuff going around, debunking the Zen 3 Plus desktop stuff going around. I saw it is incredibly highly upvoted. Tons of comments in there saying, you know, thank me for not just regurgitating fake leaks for clicks. Thank you for, you know, in fact, doing an anti-leak, basically. But I want to say that, you know, if you appreciate that honesty and that type of investigation, that last video took, I mean, a lot of research, a lot of digging, a lot of prodding into sources that I usually don't like to bother. And unfortunately, it doesn't get as many clicks as like pretending Zen 3 Plus is a thing, you know? And so that's all I want to say. And I actually talked to some people at some tech websites as well that said, well, we don't want to cover it because we don't want to put out an article saying, even if we know it's fake, that it's fake, because we will get less clicks on the next article then, you know? So if you want to support that type of video, this type of content, just remember that you got to support it then, you know? That's the one thing I do want to say at the end of this month, because I do feel like the amount of people in the comments of that video said, oh, this is one of my favorite videos, and yet it's not a very lucrative thing to work on. So if you do like this type of content, just remember that it really does need the support with all the effort we're putting into right now, because at a certain point, I just feel like people need to put their money where their mouth is. Like, do you want honest reporting? Do you want honest investigations? Do you want honest journalism? It's not going to exist because it's not as easy to get clicks out of it unless you support it. That's all I want to really say here. Someone suggested I should put lighting tracks on the ceiling. Yeah, I'm going to. Anyway, so yep, that's all I got to say. And remember, if you do support me on Patreon, you're supporting me, Dan, Gerard, a whole team, and you get a mountain of exclusive content. Like in under 24 hours, the next Broken Silicon with Jimmy Song, who's he's a brilliant programmer. I think it's one of the best episodes, comes out early without ads. So remember, you get that type of stuff too. Yeah, I mean, let's see what else there is. So before I get into the live ones, let's get into the patron questions. Again, you know, if you're a patron, you can ask these questions for free. So Aaron Capo writes in and asks, and I think we got some really good patron questions this month for the loose end. So I'm actually excited about this. Let me write down a timestamp. Let's see which design involved. So put that at where are we at here? About 10 minutes. Okay. If you could be invited to join, it's from Aaron Capel. He says, if you could be invited to join a product development team, such as a team working on Alder Lake, DG2, Zen 4, Zen 5, or RDNA 3, what team would you want to spectate and why? Feel free to elaborate. I love the content. I'm glad I can support what you're doing. So it's hard to say, right? Because it's like, how do you answer that question? Is the question, because if you think about it, you could answer this question from the perspective of what do you not know anything about? Like, right? Like Zen 7. Like, would I want to know what Zen 7 is? Would I want to know, or would I want to know more about like the Intel architectures from 2026? That's weird. Excited Box writes in the live chat, Zen 4 will be monstrous. Wrong channel. How's that the wrong channel? I've talked about Zen 4 and leaked information a year ago about it. I'm excited about Zen 4. Which is to say, I'm excited about things coming from Intel and AMD soon. And I mean, NVIDIA kind of less so. I think NVIDIA is pretty much done for a little bit when it comes to gaming hardware. So, I mean, honestly, the most interesting thing I think to learn about, probably not Alder Lake, because I think we know everything about it basically by now. I would say the Cove that I know is coming, either the Cove that I know is coming after Lunar Lake, because I could talk about that if I want. I can't really talk about it yet. Or I'd want to know more about like RDNA 4. I'm not too concerned about RDNA 3. I think AMD is proving their track record here. And I'm not that concerned about NVIDIA either. I think you know what you're going to get without even any leak. I think really the like Zen 5, Zen 6 even, you know, Lunar Lake and later stuff is what's interesting, because I think that's when we're going to really see a fundamental shift, kind of like what we saw with Zen 2 in how we build and organize CPUs. And that's when we're going to get some massive performance increases. So that's what I would say is just like anything from Intel and AMD that far ahead. I want to know what their targets really, really are, if they're really that confident. I have some targets for what they're planning to do, but I'd like to be there and talk to them and be like, hey guys, are you actually going to accomplish this? Because this is crazy. So that's how I would answer the question. Jacob writes in and asks, a few days ago, Dr. Ian Cutress in his Alder Lake analysis said that it won't or shouldn't come out this year due to DDR5 not being ready. On the other hand, an article from 4 days ago on Tom's Hardware says that Crucial's DDR4 RAM is ready for retail right now. So I don't know if I cut off. Oh, so there's the rest of the question. Do you think Alder Lake with DDR5 will come out this year? Can we expect any Alder Lake leaks from you in May? Yes and yes. I mean, I saw some people mention that, and I did watch that video from Ian. I thought it was a very good video. I found his take interesting for Alder Lake, but I just stand by no. Look, Alder Lake's coming out this year, guys. So that's it. You know, and I think, do I think Intel should just fuck around with Rocket Lake for any longer? That's a very easy question for me to answer. No, they shouldn't. They need something better now. That's my opinion. People can disagree, but that's what I think. The latest I think Alder Lake will come out is like Q1. I don't think it's that. I think it's, yeah, and some people are saying DDR5 will be expensive. Correct. You know, did I put that message that I had from a source in my last video about it? Yeah, DDR5's, again, similar to what I'm hearing, is similar to DDR4, similar to DDR3, but more so DDR4, I guess. When DDR5 first comes out, it's going to be more expensive than you expect. And I know everyone's expecting it to be expensive. I've actually heard that DDR5 may be more expensive than you expect it to be, even though you expect it to be expensive, which is unfortunate. But it is what it is. And in fact, what I've heard is because prices are so high, because people are buying anything they can get their hands on right now, that, well, then why not release it with DDR5? Because people are apparently willing to spend a boatload of money on everything, right? And so that's all I can say is I do think Alder Lake's coming out this year. If latest is Q1 2021, and I do think they'll have both DDR5 and DDR4 options. The plan at first was mostly DDR4, but I could see both. And, the argument that they shouldn't do it is like, yeah, I don't know. To me, that sounds like the people arguing like the PS5 or Xbox shouldn't have launched in 2020 because it was hard to get. Yeah, I still think it was a good idea to launch those because you have competition and you need to recapture mind share and get your products out there as soon as possible, even if it's hard to get. That's the unfortunate truth is as much as it sucks at how hard it is to get something, it benefits these companies to get it out as soon as possible, as long as it's working. That's the only thing I will say is Alder Lake should launch working really well, right? Obviously don't launch it before the software is ready, but Guthrie writes in and says, if you had to build a PC for AAA gaming right now, would you? Well, you said if I had to. That infers that there's no other choice. If I have to, then I guess I have to. But if there's an option and I have something else to use, the answer is no. And again, this is something that people don't want to hear me say, but like, here's how I would phrase the should you build a PC right now question. Has there ever been a worse time to build a PC? I think it's arguable that there hasn't been. So if this is the worst time to build a PC, then if you still build one, then that means you'll just always build one no matter what. That just means that this isn't a real question for you, that you just build when you want to and it doesn't matter. So then it's not a real question for someone like that. But anyone who's trying to be discerning, I would say no. Now, he says, if you had to build, though, would you do a second-hand budget rig or sell my soul to scalpers? Budget rig. For sure, budget rig. This isn't going to last forever, guys. For sure, budget rig. That's what I would do. And in fact, if you look at the CPU prices, those are already starting to come down or become more obtainable a little bit. In fact, some people in my Discord pointed out that some of the like 9900K and Comet Lake chips are every now and then on Amazon or Micro Center for absurdly low prices, like below 300. I've never been a fan of Coffee Lake. Everyone knows that, but hey, no such thing as a bad product, just bad prices. If the 9900K was like $200, then yeah, do that. Just do a budget rig, man, And like, why wouldn't you do that? That's going to run games fine for the money. Get some GPU. You can find one somewhere usually, you really needed one. Get the cheapest thing that will play your games on eBay or whatever, and then just wait to see if, a 6700 XT comes in stock on AMD's website or something from Best Buy for NVIDIA or something, because, I've had multiple friends get a hold of a 6700 XT from AMD's website. It's not easy, but they are coming up every week. They add a few more. So, I would just do budget build and then try to get stuff because I think things are going to become easier to get. Let me put a timestamp there. Let me see here. Budget build, budget versus scalper. We'll call that, a former long. Okay, and then we'll put another one here. Wait, yeah. Give me a second, guys. I apologize. Moving questions. So Russell Purcell writes in and says, a former longtime Nashvilleian here. Curious, why did you choose this city? What impressed you about it? How does it align with your plans for the future? Well, first of all, this is, I grew up in central Illinois. At this point, most of my friends have moved out of there, and I have a lot of friends in this area, whether it's Louisville, Nashville, this general area. So that was a big factor. Additionally, guys, look, I can work from almost anywhere, and Nashville, Tennessee has really low taxes, whereas like Illinois and some other states just hammer creators with taxes when I'm not really sure what they're doing to help you succeed in some of these states. So that's an honest to God truth. And then I also love comedy, and there's a huge growing comedy scene here. So that's really what it is. There were multiple cities that I've been to that I like, but this is the one I chose, for a few reasons. When Brian Steiner writes in, it says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate moving? 1 being, I don't ever want to touch a box again. 10 being, it's so exciting. Why didn't I do this sooner? Well, I think when you look at what's going on with housing, I probably should have done it sooner from that perspective. But otherwise, I would just say in the middle. It was stressful. It sucked, but I'm used to dealing with stress. The crap I have to deal with running this YouTube channel, like the insane egos of some people on Twitter I've got to put up with. Yeah, moving was stressful, but I've dealt with a lot of stressful stuff. So, I'm not going to move again next month, but no, it doesn't stop me from moving again. It doesn't. It just means I'm not doing it anytime soon again. um, Illyrium writes in onward with the important questions. Can you distinguish the accent between someone from East Tennessee and Alabama yet? No. I mean, if you put two people next to each other, I'm sure I could say he's talking in a different way, but no. No. I mean, I was born in Minnesota. I'm more of a northerner typically, so no, I really can't. At least I couldn't do an impression of both, right? It's not like it's in my Rolodex. Arcane 311 writes in and asks, it's good to see you're finally settled in. I saw some pictures from Twitter. Those scares look sketchy AF. Also, have you ever thought about doing a fan meetup? I live not far from Nashville, and having a beer with my favorite YouTuber would be a treat. I mean, yeah, I mean, especially now that I'm in a bigger city than Peoria was, it's something me and Dan would consider for sure. Some sort of meetup or live show. I would just need to find a way to gauge interest because I'm not going to just schedule it, right, and then have no one. I'd have to see if there's a real want for that to happen. You guys would have to write in over and over and tell us that's what you want. And then I'd have to, I think Patreon actually allows you to do this gauging of interest thing where if you meet a certain threshold, an event will happen. So you could just do that. And then see if, the bunch of people would actually come to a live show, then we'd do it, but a lot of people would have to for it to be worth it. Josh Law writes in and says, not a question. I just want to say I'm a nurse and I absolutely love listening to Broken Silicon and Die Shrink in the background of doing mountains of paperwork and documentation. Thank you. Well, yeah. And I mean, thanks for, continuing the work during the past, over 12 months now. It's been a rough time to be a nurse. And, any way that I help anyone is nice to hear. So, of course. All right. So that's it for the intro stuff. Now we are into the live chat. Let me see here. Let me see. If you have any questions, put them in the live chat now. I will be looking. If you provide even just a small chip, it will pop out way better. And again, YouTube revenue's been like the worst month for YouTube revenue in like a year out of nowhere. So, any help you can provide is appreciated. But let me put down this timestamp here as the start of the live chat. And make sure you ask specific questions, right? Because like I'm not like if you just say, there was a video. It's like, well, I'm not going to answer that. Ask a specific question in the live chat. Be very clear what you're asking. And otherwise, of course, if you're a patron, you can just ask the questions in the video chat Discord channel for free. Okay. What are your thoughts on Ethereum 2.0? Well, what I will say is that, let me write that down as a timestamp. The next guest is Jimmy Song, and he's a programmer and teacher for graduate courses. He runs a blockchain boot camp where he teaches programmers and dozens at a time to program blockchain. This is not some hodl Lambo guy. This is a very real developer who did programming before cryptocurrency. It has written real code that's been implemented into open source projects. He's part of multiple startups. Senior, like his resume is really impressive. So he's the next guest on Broken Silicon. That'll come out to patrons in under 24 hours. We talk about Ethereum and all of that there. Long story short, what I will say in this is I just don't really talk about the Ethereum stuff. Half of their projects have been delayed and had problems. The King Buterin just rolled back the blockchain when his friends lost money. That's not what I look for in a currency. If I don't look for someone who just rolls back money out of nowhere because he fucked up the code. Like, yeah, that's not something that I'm that interested in. But if you want to mine it for money, go for it. Just remember that you just remember to trade it for other stuff, because if that blockchain were to go belly up, you don't have any money then. And let me see here. And then someone in the chat says Cardano is better. What's better than Cardano, according to people? Dogecoin, which is something I just really want to hammer here, guys. If it's not Bitcoin, it's hype. If it's not Bitcoin, it's hype that makes it gain money. Maybe Cardano will be a good project, but I don't know, right? That doesn't mean that it's going to be a good investment. A good project does not make a good investment, right? And you just got to remember that. If you bought Cardano, you should have just invested in Doge, which is just making money because it's a meme. So I just hope people remember that when they say I'm in it for the tech or whatever. Let me see here. Not seeing any tip questions here, unfortunately. That's a bit concerning. Again, and so it's funny in the chat, some people are saying Doge to the moon. I would just say, again, a reminder to people that just make sure like you cash out some of it for like dollars or Bitcoin or something. You don't want it to go all the way up and then come all the way down and you did nothing with it. Same with like GameStop. All right, there's the first tip question. I'm a bit concerned here. Eric Winberg writes in, maybe Weinberg. I don't know if that's spelled that way though, but and he says, more slides did is a wonderful listen. Question: if Taiwan chip plants go offline, how long is the recession? Oh God, I mean, at a certain point, I would say if Taiwan's chip manufacturing went down, like that's almost like where you go. Are you even is the recession itself from that the real concern? Because if that happened, it was probably caused by some crazy act of war, and the repercussions of that would be profound. I wouldn't worry about it just in terms of a simple recession. I'd be like, what's happening to the planet if all of that went down for a long time? That's really all I would say about that, right? I don't want to get into politics or anything. Chris Kangan says, no question, just love your content. Nice to catch you live. Oh, thanks for the tip. Feel free to ask a comment below that, though. Like I'm here for you. You only do this once a month. The moderator saying don't spam questions. I'll answer what I want to, guys. Spamming questions, in fact, is probably going to make me not answer it. More likely to not answer it, I should say. Says cash out when Elon Musk is done shit posting. Yeah, but will Elon Musk ever stop shit posting? I think that's a real question right there. Write down a timestamp. But yeah, I would say about Taiwan, though, that's why it's important for these companies to diversify locations. Is it possible that a Zen 3 refresh is just rebranding in the lower to mid end? Alder Lake will increase core count in that segment. Yeah, a little bit, but it's not like Alder Lake's really going to compete core to core even with Zen 3. So AMD might need Ryzen 3 6 cores. I mean, I wouldn't rule that out. I think they were considering doing that with Zen 3. They just decided they didn't need to. That's what I would say is that, yeah, that AMD was probably considering moving the core counts down per segment and just making like both the 900X and 950X 16 core. They didn't need to yet. If they would do that to compete with Alder Lake, yeah, I don't know they would really need to either. If they just do a simple XT refresh, which it sounds like that's the most likely scenario that they're planning now, especially because we haven't heard anything about anything else. So that's really the only thing they could be doing almost at this point. Not quite, but almost. Then, I mean, what, they're adding a few percentage points. Really, I only expect the top Alder Lake to compete with the 5900X in multi-threading performance. So if you think about it from that perspective, right, AMD doesn't have anything touching the 5950X's multi-threading. And even in single core performance, I would expect Alder Lake to only be 15% better at most. And then so if AMD just increases core clocks by like 3%, then what are we looking at here? Intel, tying a 5900 XT in multi-threading, winning in single-threaded by 10%-ish or something. That's really no different than what happened with Coffee Lake versus, not even. It'd be even worse for Intel than that. It'd be basically Comet Lake versus Zen 2 kind of situation. Not even as maybe a little better for Intel than that. Does AMD need to worry about that when Zen 4 would probably be coming out 6 months after Alder Lake? I don't think so. I think they could just put in the XT and lower prices on the other SKUs. I don't think they really, in other words, right? I don't think they really need to release a new lineup with 6 cores, right? I don't think they need to make a, what would you call it then? A 6500X. I don't think they need to make a 6500X 6-core for 150 or something when they can just drop the price on the 3600 or 5600X to 200. Why? Just drop the price. It's been out for a year by the time Alder Lake comes out or around that. So that's what I think AMD is most likely to do. XT refreshes to try to get that little performance bump to steal headlines from Intel. So Intel's benchmarks are put up against AMD's best golden samples, and then just drop the price on the other products if they need to, right? And they might need to, because if i3s from Intel have 6 cores and and then their i5s, whatever, and so on and so forth, then yeah, they might need to. But AMD is making such crazy margins on Zen 3. I don't think they'll care really. Nathan writes in and asks, early on, did you expect 1440p to get so popular? Well, that's an interesting question. Here's how I'll answer that. I do like that question because people know that I talk about various resolutions a ton. That's a really good question. I like this one because it's a different question. Let me write that down as a timestamp. Is 1440p more popular than expected? It's not that it's necessarily more popular than I expected. I'm just surprised in how it's supported and how something hasn't replaced it. Like these 4K monitors, guys, are not that expensive to manufacture. My phones have had 4K screens for I want to say 4 years now. And my laptops have had 4K screens for 4 years now as well. Even I don't have any of the laptops up here right now. Even I had an NV13T from I think 2016, all the way back then. You had 13-inch NVs that you could get for $800 refurbished on eBay. Fantastic deals, and they would have 4K screens. That's what surprises me, is that when you have $800 laptops with dedicated graphics, I'll buy weak ones, but a 4K screen, and then you still can't seem to find 4K screens for that cheap yet. That's what blows me away. It's not that 1440p is more popular than I expected. It's that I can't believe that the prices have remained so stagnant, but people keep buying them. So why make a 4K screen if they're going to buy your 1440p one and you can make bigger margins? And frankly, a lot of people don't seem to care about gaming at a higher resolution if they're pure PC gamers. And if that's the truth, well, yeah, that's what the market dictates it wants. So that's how I would answer that question. I like that one a lot. Let me scroll up. I did get a bunch here. I don't want to miss them. Lars Hansen writes in and asks, okay, one question. Will we see an Xbox Series X version 2 with a better CPU and more GPU power within the next 2 years? So within the next 2 years. So you mean within mid 2023? Because the way I would say is I expect an Xbox refresh in 2023. I do. Maybe even 2022. I mean, it's called the Series. I don't even think that they'll necessarily make it a new name. They might just say this Series X 2023 model year, kind of like a car. It's kind of what I expect Xbox to do. A stronger CPU. Yeah, my guess would be they would just kind of do what they did with the Series, or I'm sorry, with the 1X, which is to say, I don't think they're going to go to 12 cores or anything crazy. They could, I guess, but I don't think they will. I think what they would just do is, update it to Zen 3 or Rembrandt Zen 3 Plus, again, reiterating that, well, I think Zen 3 Plus on desktop isn't a real project. I do think that the APU it uses for Rembrandt is an enhanced Zen 3, kind of like Renoir was over Zen 2. So I would say something like that, and they just clock it what's it at now on the Xbox? Isn't it 3.8 gigahertz or something? They just clock it at 4 gigahertz. That way, if it's running Xbox Series X games, they just run that a little bit more stable of a frame rate. I would expect that for the CPU, and then I'd expect a bigger GPU. That's what I would expect. And a faster SSD, most likely, just because it'd be almost more expensive not to make the SSD faster as things keep progressing. Yeah, that's what I expect. That's a good question as well. Let me see that Series X version 2. Put that as a timestamp. Modna89 writes in and says, when AMD brings integrated GPUs to all CPUs, well, there still will probably be some without it. I mean, Intel still makes the KF, although I guess you're just arguing that's disabled, so they technically kind of did. Do you think each chiplet will have its own GPU cores, or will there be a separate GPU chiplet alongside the CPU? If I was AMD, I would put the GPU cores on an IO die. And that would almost open up the possibility of not even putting chiplets on there and just having like boot, you know, you could almost sell a CPU for like $40, right? That's just the IO die. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it, guys? Like, just so you can make sure your motherboard works. That's what I would imagine they would do. But would I be surprised if they put, I guess I would be a little surprised actually if they put it on the CPU chiplets. Like, why wouldn't you just do, if it's not on the IO die, I think you just want like CPU chiplet, GPU chiplet. That's what I would imagine they would do. And then let me move on to the next question. But of course, I don't know. I'm not confirming that yet. But Tim Pang writes in and asks, any idea about Tiger Lake H45 compared to Rocket Lake? Thanks and keep up the great content. I mean, at the end of the day, Tiger Lake H45 is Rocket Lake using far, far, far less energy with slightly higher IPC. That's what Tiger Lake is. And, you know, probably lower clocks, but it's meant for laptops anyways. Like, honestly, if Intel were to take Tiger Lake H45, release it on desktop, and let it clock higher, it wouldn't surprise me if it could hit 5 gigahertz without an issue too. So that's how I would think of Tiger Lake H45, is just a non-shitty Rocket Lake, basically. That's basically all it is. In Dreju writes in and asks, how long until APUs regulate anything at or below an X700 XT or NVIDIA's X70 series? Right. So how long until AMD's APUs, and perhaps Intel's APUs, by the way, take up the mantle of the entire low end? Like, there's no point in a 3050 Ti. Well, two answers, right? Number one, there's always going to be like 4050 Ti's, 5050 Ti's, 5400 XTs every now and then, you know, that type of like lower end cards, just because not everyone has the newest chips. If you don't have the newest chips, it's cheaper to upgrade to a graphics card. There's a lot of, you know, markets for that too, just getting a weak GPU to test or do certain things with multi-monitor. So those are always going to exist. I just think they'll be far rarer and far in between releases. Let me fix that focus. There we go. So I think they're always going to exist. You just won't see as many of them. And additionally, though, when would it like take up the high end? I mean, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if most low end gamers just use APUs by 2024. But I just don't think we're quite there yet, because AMD still seems like they don't have the resources to launch specific high end APUs yet. Like, look at how they launched Renoir and then rebranded it as Lucian below Cezanne. Like, they keep reusing the same dies they keep making. So I don't think AMD really has the resources to make a mega APU for AM4 quite yet. They could. They've made them. Look at the PS5 and Xbox. Those are mega APUs. They could totally make one right now if they wanted to put in the money. I just don't know if they think it fits into their product stack. Just like how Renoir didn't come out on desktop with Zen 2. Why? Because they already had Zen Plus APUs in the 3000 Ryzen series on desktop. They had no reason to release a Renoir to desktop. They already had a product filling that niche of the low-end APU CPU. And they didn't want to bother until about now, which I think Cezanne may eventually come to low-end desktop. And that's when they'll do it, when they feel like their Zen Plus APUs have fully run their course. Because at the very least, that just seems to be how AMD sees the situation to this day. But yeah, anyways, moving on from that question. Meximan and Cheese asks, given NVIDIA's breakneck reaction with a 12 gigabyte 3060, do you think we're going to see a VRAM race next gen, and how far will it go? 48 gigabyte 4080? I think if NVIDIA does an Ampere refresh at the end of this year, which I've long said I think is a logical thing for them to do. Clearly, Ampere, if they had better binning, I mean, just look at A6000. If they had better binning, better, you know, they could get better yields out of it, which the yields aren't bad, but again, you know what I mean? Like, if they could bin it better or make the top die at TSMC, clearly they could squeeze another 20%. They just used faster memory. Even if it was just 15%, right? Even if the 4090, because right, the 3080s really cut down. So let's just say, even if the 4090 was only 15% better than the 3090, but it used like 300 watts instead of 350, that's a good product to release. Why not? Even if like the 3080 was only, or the 4080 was only 15% better than the 3080, but then it had more RAM, like 12 gigabytes, that would make sense to release. So do I think it's going to race to a 48 gigabyte card next year? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if NVIDIA went way higher. Um, I don't think 48 gigabyte cards are going to be truly mainstream for years. And it doesn't, again, it's most like 8 gigabytes just isn't really enough for 4K anymore if you want to call it a high-end card, right? You might be able to slum it, but not if it's a high-end card. I don't call that card high-end if it has 8 gigabytes. I mean, what is this, a 480? Like, come on. I would just say that I think once you get to about 16 gigabytes, that's probably enough for a while. So I don't think 48 gigabytes anytime soon. Judson N writes in and says, do you think I'm crazy waiting for DDR5 to build my next rig when I'm running a 7700K and a 1070? Let me write this down as a time stamp. Waiting for DDR5. So it feels like my 1070 is starting to drop more frames than before on the same games and settings. I'm not sure. It's again, man, it's about your budget. Are you crazy? Not necessarily. I'm going to be honest. I did some testing on the 6700 XT. I tested it on my system, Dan's system, and I even tested it on my backup benchmarking, which I think is still packed up back there, system with a 6700K. Now, granted, the 6700K had I don't know, I think 3600 megahertz RAM with tight timings. It was running at 4.8 gigahertz. So it's not like it was a stock Skylake. It was really well tuned. But I found the 6700K still ran games at 60 frames in most of the games I tested. So as much as you definitely don't want a quad core for high refresh anymore, and some games will just stutter with a quad core now. If you're happy with it, I think the 7700K probably, look, a stronger CPU will run the 1070 better, but you have 8 gigs of RAM, you have a fast Skylake. If you really want to space it out, I don't think you're crazy. What I would say though is you're going to see some sticker shock if you wait for DDR5 with Alder Lake. What I would say is that, just keep in mind, if you want to be one of the first DDR5 owners, it's not going to be cheap. Now, maybe you're okay with that. And, I don't know, though. I think if you're going to wait for DDR5, you're probably going to want to wait for Raptor Lake in 2022 is what I'm guessing you want to wait for, which I believe is kind of akin to a Alder Lake Plus and with better DDR5 and motherboard support. And by then, DDR5 will maybe be a little more reasonably priced and faster, right, with better timings. So that's kind of what I would just say is mentally prepare yourself if you're waiting for DDR5 for 2022, because that might be when it's realistically worth getting. But keep in mind that your 7700K uses DDR4. So if you got an Alder Lake motherboard with DDR4, you could use your old RAM and then wait for DDR4 to get cheaper. And then because DDR4 isn't bad, and it's getting really fast speeds. If you were to just get Alder Lake, use your old RAM and then maybe wait for 64 gigabytes or something of 4,000 megahertz memory to become a reasonable price, assuming prices ever go down again, which I guess we can't be sure of that, but assuming that happens, I don't think that's going to hold you back at all. I think that'll feed Alder Lake just fine, Keep that in mind. And then you can just wait much longer and then get Lunar Lake with DDR5, and that'll be way better supported or something. Bob LeCool writes in and says, firstly, love your content. Well, thank you. Your honest reporting is awesome. Do you see GPU and CPU prices coming down by end of year? My call is crypto is due for a crash this year based on historical data. What do you think? Well, again, I think most of the price increases are not crypto this time, guys. It's gamer demand and general shortages. I mean, cars have stopped being made. This isn't just crypto, guys. It really isn't this time. I think that, you just need to think about it outside of just that. Do I think prices, again, here's how I'll answer the question. I think prices will get better by end of year. Does that mean they'll be back to normal? Probably not. But will anything ever become normal again? I mean, I was talking to Daniel Nenny about this, which again, plug that episode, one of the best broken silicons, I think. And he goes what doesn't use silicon? There's a shortage because silicon in here. I mean, everything I'm looking at is silicon in it now. So of course there's a shortage when people save money due to a pandemic in 2020. And then, oh, look, we worked remotely. We saved tons of money. Let's spend in 2021. Shortages. That's what's going on. So I think things will get better by the end of this year, but I'm not making any bets on how much better. That's what I would answer. But again, that does kind of answer any question of like, should I buy things from scalpers now? My answer is no. No, not unless, of course, for some reason you need to. Let me go back up. I don't want to miss those questions. Yeah, so Mio1570 writes in and says, with more details of direct storage coming out recently, have you heard anything about how future GPU architectures will take advantage of it at all? Not really. I can't say that I've specifically tried to find anything out about it, but well, outside of I talked to a couple developers, it's like half a year ago, but I talked to a couple developers about direct storage, and the long story. So I guess let me put a timestamp here because it's probably very interesting to people. Direct storage API. So honestly, what I was told is that direct storage and what is it, Tensor accelerated, whatever NVIDIA's version of it is, that it actually will give you similar loading performance to the next gen consoles if your SSD is fast enough. Now, obviously, again, the PS5 is 12 channel memory on the SSD, and it's co-processors to control the data flow. So it's not like you can compare it apples to apples, but like that, yeah, you might be able to get to somewhat instant load times if you have a really fast Gen 4 SSD and enough cores. The problem is this, though. That's all direct storage is really going to do from and I know I'm sure it does other stuff, but the way a developer explained it to me is direct storage API will make it so that if you load traditionally and then get into a game, it's kind of as fast as the consoles, but that's not going to be able to asset stream as well because there's still all of this bottlenecks and moving data in different directions at the same time that the consoles with their co-processors have that frankly aren't really using it right now as far as we can tell, unfortunately. But that, yeah, direct storage is actually better than you would expect for loading quickly, but that it's not going to be as capable of asset streaming as something that has like dedicated hardware for doing that. At least not in its first incarnation. So I think that answers your question. In terms of how that will help future GPU generations, I guess what I'm saying is they'll need to put more direct silicon blocks on the GPU to do what to do things more than just load quickly, if that makes sense. Just join Patreon. Where do I ask questions for here? I think I see you in the... There it is. Nathan just joined the Patreon. I see you in the Discord channel. So I'm looking over now and I see it. And I'm just moving through these questions as quickly as I can, Nathan. Thank you for your support. He goes, I have a quick question. When do you think that Intel Alder Lake will be in laptops? Really looking forward to having a strong gaming laptop with good battery life for university. Well, first of all, what I would say is I think Tiger Lake 8 cores will be good CPUs for laptops. So don't sleep on those. Don't sleep on Rembrandt. Don't sleep on... Cezanne is really good. I don't think you need to wait for Alder Lake for a good laptop CPU at all. I think that then I would say Alder Lake, I've heard they could launch it on laptop this year if they wanted to. It's just not a priority because they think H45 from Tiger Lake is good enough for now, and that the priority is desktop because that's where they're most behind. And then, of course, the priority is also like Sapphire Rapids, way more important than Alder Lake on desktop. So what I'm saying is they could conceivably launch Alder Lake laptops this year, but that I don't have any proof they're going to, nor does it sound like they're prioritizing it when they just launched Tiger Lake. I hope that answers your question. Let me scroll down. Todd Ferson, thank you for the tip. Todd, remember you can ask a question. Let me see here. Yeah, if you see any graphical glitches, I don't know. I'd say that's YouTube. I'm jacked into an Ethernet right now, so I don't know what would cause that. Frame Chasers writes in and says, any word on NVIDIA changing all SKUs to anti-mining? I mean, they've announced they're going to do that with upcoming releases, so I wouldn't doubt it. What I would doubt is that it will stop mining firms from using these cards for mining. And it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter when NVIDIA is shipping the dies directly to fucking miners. Like, so again, it's like this mining prevention stuff NVIDIA's putting in their gaming cards, it just hurts gamers. Mining firms will do what they want, and NVIDIA's selling dies directly to them. It doesn't help us. All limiting mining performance on gaming cards does is cut gamers out of part of the profits. It makes it so gamers can't even make the best of a bad situation, and it's really infuriating and gross. I don't know what else to say, but this is NVIDIA. They want to control their products. They want the mining firms to buy their dies directly, not try to buy them from Newegg. They want miners to not be able to resell their cards for as much money because Well, that's what they want to do for their profit margins. So again, I'll keep saying it. The best thing you could do to help any anything that's making mining cards hurt ability for gamers to get graphics cards, the best thing you can do is just make more cards, make them all capable of gaming, and try to make sure it's gamers that get a hold of them. But limiting mining performance, it just hurts gamers in multiple ways, honestly. Like, cat's out of the bag anyways too on that. Let me see. Remember, hit the like button, everybody. I see almost 800 people on the chat, but we need 800 likes here. Come on, guys. Remember to like. Eddie R writes in and says, anything you can tell us about Intel 5 nanometer? I mean, yeah, they're working on it. It's not going to be out for, I mean, a long time. That's about all I'll say about Intel 5 nanometer. On paper, their 7 nanometer should be pretty good, though. But again, that's not going to be ready for a couple of years anyways. Elite Destroyer 00 writes in and says, thoughts on when mesh shaders will make their way into games? Personally, the thought of mesh shaders and DLSS gets me a bit giddy. Love the show. Not really. I mean, let me even just look that up to refresh myself exactly. I mean, I would just say when you add, yeah, so like they introduced it with Turing. So I would say, I mean, you're going to start seeing it popping up more and more often late this year and into next year. You just have to remember that when they build games, a lot of games take a very long time to make. And if the engine, you're not going to really get full advantage out of them until you've built the engine to use it from the ground up. So, I mean, it's going to start making its way into games now, especially I would imagine console exclusives, because they just have to program for one piece of hardware. So it makes sense for them to just do it right away. But in terms of like PC games, it's like, oh, they're coming and you're going to see it more often over time. Andre Jew writes in and says, I know you keep dismissing the idea. Well, we'll see. But why can't AMD make the APU GPU part link up with a discrete AMD GPU form in the same generation, adding extra compute to the graphics, essentially locking NVIDIA out, especially. Yeah, so basically you're asking, why do I poo-poo the idea? I don't know that I do, but like, do I poo-poo the idea then that AMD can add a GPU to the CPU and make it run Crossfire or multi-GPU acceleration with a graphics card that's in a PCIe slot? There's a lot of latency problems with that. You saw that all the time back when AMD did try that. And so look that up. Eventually, by the end of it, I think by Kavari, AMD got it working okay, actually. But it took so many generations. And then just as quickly, when it started working well, it stopped being supported in Crossfire by devs. So I think you will see, IP blocks on CPUs accelerate certain types of workloads next to the GPU. Yeah, you'll see that. But in terms of like literally doubling GPU performance, I don't know. I just don't know. I think that what you might see is it just runs like some extra AA effect, maybe. Like that's basically what I expect. Yeah. Like I just don't. It's not that I'm poo-pooing the idea. I just don't really see them, because it can't be pure Crossfire. They're not putting a GPU that big on the CPU, my dude. And if they're not doing that, then like what performance benefit are you even getting? Like, are you putting a graphics card on the CPU that's like a tenth the performance of a 6800 XT? Okay. Well, then there's going to be some performance loss intrinsically just due to latency communicating between the GPUs and just because of software support. And so if it's 10% the performance of a 6800 XT, and then there's some performance loss because there's two of them, what are you adding, like 5%? How much programming does that require? I don't see that being a thing in and of itself, like in a linear performance boost. What I could see is just like maybe adding an extra AA effect for free, right? Like maybe like 8 compute units run TAA and let the GPU just worry about the other stuff. I could see that. I think Intel messed with that a little bit. There was some experimentation with that type of stuff as well, I think, on the Intel side. Okay, I believe I have caught up with those tip questions. Let me see what we have here in the I said here in a weird way. What we have here, almost like a Dutch American accent there, in the after video chat. So yeah, patrons, remember that you can put questions in that channel right there. Otherwise, I'll just pick the ones that I want. Let me see. Does it make sense for motherboard manufacturers to put 2 DIMM slots when DDR5 is moving forward? Do you mean both DDR4 and DDR5 DIMM slots? I think the answer is no. That's not how Intel likes to do it, at least not for a while. Intel says just put the chipset, put either DDR4 DIMMs or DDR5 DIMMs. I don't think they're going to put both. And I don't really think they need to. How often do people really upgrade platforms? I think most people tend to buy a platform and sit with it and just upgrade GPUs for a while. It's nice to have, but yeah. Thoughts on 3060 laptops? They're not much better than 2060 laptops. There's my thought. Aiden FS asks, what do you think about the big little core configurations for the lower core counts? I kind of expect the i3 is just going to be 6. Actually, what I've heard is if they get big little working well, I've actually heard that Intel may put more little cores than big cores on lower end models. So you could almost see like a quad core at 5 gigahertz i3 with 6 little cores in the background for background tasks. I wouldn't be surprised if Intel did that, but they have a lot of options. What I also know is I believe there's a monolithic Alder Lake die that's just 6 cores. So that's probably what they'd use. Judson N writes in and asks, thoughts on whether Intel will keep their own manufacturing? I guess let me write that down as a timestamp. Intel manufacturing. Thoughts on Intel will keep their own manufacturing. What obstacles have they come into trying to implement the new techs at their plants? Well, I don't think we have time to go through all of the hurdles Intel's had to go through with their silicon nodes. So I'm going to maybe not touch on that one too much. But I think Intel's keeping their own manufacturing for a very long time. At least that's what I shouldn't say very long, but for now. I know people keep suggesting maybe Intel will spin off their fabs, but I just don't see it. And I think it's a real asset that people are underemphasizing when you think about 3D stacking architectures. Right? Like if you look at Ponte Vecchio, that's a lot of chips. I think it's like 40 or more chiplets, and they're from all different nodes. The ability to have full control over your own fab's design rules and design for your own fab allows you to have a ton of control about dies that might be stacked together. These are really complex architectures we're about to see with like Lunar Lake, Zen 4, and Zen 5, maybe even Meteor Lake. And so do you know how hard it might be to like design a TSMC for a TSMC node you don't have full control over and then try to stack them together? I think that's a real asset to Intel moving forward. That's what I think. And so I think it behooves them to simply try to keep up with TSMC as best they can. Right now, what? I guess you could say they're 10 nanometers. If Alder Lake is good, we'll say their 10 nanometers as good as like TSMC's 7, like early 7 nanometer, which is a lot better. But then, by then TSMC's at 5 nanometer. By then AMD's Intel's over a node behind. And before 10 nanometer really came out this year, Intel was basically 2 nodes behind TSMC, which is bad. But if Intel could keep half a node behind TSMC, once they get to like 5, 3 nanometer, if Intel could just perpetually keep half a node behind, I think it's an asset to have your own fabs. And I think you're seeing that with AMD's shortages and such. It's an asset. It's an asset to have your own fabs. It's just you need to be willing to go outside when necessary. And you need to make sure your fabs, maybe you don't need your fabs to be as good as TSMC, but they should be within a node of TSMC. And when they're 2 and 3 nodes behind, it's bad, 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 bad. That's what I think. I'm not an expert, but that is what I think. And it's an opinion I don't think I've heard a lot of people vocalize. Or should I say an opinion I don't think a lot of people have thought about, maybe. Write that down as a timestamp. I think that's a pretty good one. Let's see. Do you think the PS3 CMOS battery issue will be a problem for PS4 and PS5? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's a problem they should solve. If it is, right? I don't know. Any speculation on whether the 3080 Ti will be 2 or 3 slot? I haven't really thought about that much. I think 2 slot probably. I think 2-slot probably. But who knows? I guess that's true. They could make it 3-slot again. Dan and exclamation points. Okay. He is my brother, co-host Broken Silicon. Cade writes in and asks, do you think that having an in-house fab accelerates the prototyping process at Intel compared to AMD? You have to wait for external fabs to make any of their engineering samples. Well, I think a major asset they have in controlling their own fabs is also like the packaging process and stuff, which they do outside of their fabs all the time, of course, as well. But again, controlling your own fab and logistics, packaging and manufacturing in the same location, which Intel can do if they want to more easily. I think that's a real asset, and that would help prototyping. Yes. But I don't know that I've ever heard someone say, oh, AMD takes forever to prototype. I haven't really heard that. I'm not saying it's not true. Will we ever go back to 2080 Founders Edition size GPUs? You mean for like the top end? I mean, yeah, the 6900 XT reference model isn't that big. It's right there, guys. Just use that. If you want a compact high-end card, or compact, I should say normal-sized high-end card. You put this here for more timestamps. Zach, let me see. Zach Miklos writes in and asks 2 questions for you. Did you watch the Microsoft GameStack video on Xbox Velocity architecture this year? I don't know, maybe. I don't remember anymore. And I don't remember if it was this year or last year. And why doesn't Microsoft make a laptop with the mode to switch to console mode? Yeah, I don't know. I think it would be a fantastic idea for Microsoft to put at least the Series S as a laptop APU and have it literally have a dual boot mode where you could like press a button and it boots up into Xbox Series S mode. And then, maybe it comes with a 1440p monitor on the Surface Xbox Edition laptop. I just think that's a brilliant idea. Let me put this down as a timestamp because I actually do have some stuff to say about that. Xbox APU usage. What I would say is I've said this multiple times. I've some evidence that Microsoft was testing the Series S APU in laptop form factors early to mid last year. And so I think they were looking into doing this. And the way I'm going to have a guest on soon who has experience working with Microsoft server engineers who talk about the Series X going into servers, which it is. It's going into xCloud. But then it's also going to be used for Azure, based on what I'm told, that they designed the Series X to be used both as a console, and then if it doesn't sell well, they can also use it as a dedicated like server APU that gives them an efficiency advantage, right? I think that's the backup to if the Series X didn't sell well, which for now it seems fine. And then I think the Series S backup was putting it into laptops or maybe into different server clusters as well for like really low power servers or something. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, yeah, I mean, I think they considered it. I just think it's selling well enough now that they don't need to. And I think it would not surprise me if what happens is if Microsoft sales for Xbox started going down, let's say, which there's no evidence they will right now, or at least not a ton, that they would then, instead of ordering less chips, just put some aside that they're not going to send to like Amazon and just say, okay, these chips, we don't need as many Xboxes. We're meeting demands. Let's put some of these chips aside and start using them for servers and laptops. It's kind of what I expect Microsoft to do if sales ever fell apart. An Xbox Series S laptop that can dual boot into literally an Xbox mode. Yeah, I think that should exist. I think it'd be awesome. I really don't have much to add. Do I think they will? I don't know. So far, there's not a lot of evidence they're doing it anytime soon. Akarsha writes in and asks, Aditya asks, planning on an NVMe SSD. Should I wait for a PS5 level SSD or pull the trigger on a Samsung 980 Pro? Well, I really recommend Sabrent. I mean, they make really good SSDs for the price, and mine's been chippering along just fine for over a year, almost like a year and a half now. I've had a Sabrent PCIe 4.0 5 gigabyte per second SSD, 5.5 gigabyte per second SSD. So, and it was like half the price of a Samsung one. Now, should you get the fastest one because the PS5 has a fast SSD? Not unless you have apps right now that use it, because, with X570, you have 2 NVMe 4.0 slots. So Just get the one that will work well now. Leave a slot empty, like the PS5, I guess, which has an empty slot as well. Just wait for prices to come down and then get it. I wouldn't rush out to get it right now. Unless, again, you can make use of the extra speed now. But it's about, are you going to use it right now? Let me see. Rob R writes in, you think next-gen consoles will be ARM chips? Tentatively, I don't think so. Could they be? Never say never. But no, I think x86 again, especially with what I'm hearing about Intel evolving their x86 architecture after Meteor Lake. Like, it sounds like they're planning to really take it to ARM or try to take it to ARM. And I would assume AMD is working on a similar type of thing because these guys, they're working on similar stuff. They're not idiots. So I would say I expect x86. When you'll see a console move to ARM outside of Nintendo, that is if Intel and AMD fell behind in innovation, and then it made sense to go with like some NVIDIA ARM chip. That's when you'll see that. But for now, I'm not seeing any evidence that AMD is slowing down in their innovation. And it sounds like Intel's going to try to catch up in a few years. So I don't think so. The Zane 22 writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, just like you can if you support us, and asks, how confident are you that Apple was at some point planning to use Van Gogh or some other AMD CPU? Well, first of all, I just think it'd be fantastic for Apple to use a Van Gogh CPU so they could say, Apple MacBook Air with exclusive Van Gogh graphics for college students. That just sounds like Apple marketing up the wazoo. But no, I don't think it was for Apple specifically. I used to think it might have been, but I think Van Gogh was most likely for the Surface, guys. I've been beating around the bush, but I think it was for the Surface, and that deal fell through. But to finish your question, let me see here. My arm's in the way of it. Apple has been planning to use their own CPUs for a long time, so why would they switch to AMD for only about a year? Well, exactly. I think Van Gogh was for the Surface, or maybe like some other high-end laptop that's thin and light. I don't think it was for Apple anymore. Now, could AMD have been designing it with the intention of hopefully they will use it for some of their laptops? Maybe. But the second they really got confirmation, Apple was going to really move forward with their own M1 chip, I'm sure AMD was like, yeah, this ain't for Apple. Although you never know. Maybe that's a part of why it might never come out. Is AMD going LGA on AM5? I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me if they were, especially with how elevated prices are. Because the argument I always heard was, as long as motherboards are more expensive than the CPUs on average, you want the motherboard to not have pins so that the motherboard ships without breaking more likely. That's actually what I heard. And if that's the case, well, think back to like Zen Plus. The fastest Zen Plus chip, the 2700X, was like $300. You had motherboards that cost around the same, and most of the lineup was below 200. So it made sense to try to make it so the motherboard didn't have pins. At this point, though, AMD's putting $800 CPUs on their AM4, and I think it makes sense to go with LGA in the future. But it's not like I've really looked into this, so. Okay, there's a good question. This channel asks, will Lunar Lake be on LGA 1700? Do you think AM5? I don't think. I can actually pull up my Intel roadmap that I haven't told you guys about yet. But let me pull it up. I don't believe. Where is this? Yeah, let me scroll down for Lunar Lake info. When I look at Lunar Lake's information, this has got to be a new socket, guys. I think that LGA 1700 will work with Alder Lake and Raptor Lake, and maybe Meteor Lake, but I don't think Lunar Lake is my answer. Don't worry, the camera wasn't going to leak, wasn't going to turn to the screen. Let me see. All right. Oh, there's a question. Elite Destroyer writes in and asks, thoughts on open source CPUs? Do you think they will compete with Intel and AMD in the near future? Not for the most part. Do I think they will in 5 years? Yes, I do. I think open source like RISC-V chips are going to be a big thing in about 5 years. I'm just not so sure they will short term, especially with like the massive technological advantage AMD has, Intel has, Apple has, Nvidia may have with their dedicated CPUs they design. I don't, you know, I don't think that RISC-V is going to take a ton of share from them right away, but I think you will see different chips using RISC-V more and more and more often over time. But as long as like AMD and Intel are looking to do massive IPC increases every year and core counts increases, it's like, are you really going to compete with them and their design teams? Not unless you're like Apple, who has endless money, or Nvidia, who has a lot of money. I don't see these other companies designing something as good as AMD and Intel, even if RISC-V had some inherent efficiency advantage. Yeah, and some people are saying not 5 years, more like 10. Hey, I didn't bet any money on when. I'm just saying not now. Who do you think has better built systems, PS5 or Xbox? Well, the PS5's hardware is purely meant for gaming, and it's really impressive at doing that considering its die size is smaller than the Series X and it performs the same, if not better sometimes. The Series X is interesting in that you can use it as a server APU. I think that's what makes the Series X really interesting. The Series X is clearly built for multiple uses, and it's really fascinating from that perspective. I just wish we could see more of them. I wish I could get a Series X APU in a laptop. That's what I wish. I don't know if you heard anything yet, but Todd Ferguson, thank you for the tip again. Again, ask questions, Todd, if you have any question. I don't know if you talked about this yet, but anything interesting about M2 or just regular old Apple hype? I haven't been keeping up with it, honestly. I just put out a Zen 3 Plus debunking thing, Apple M2 rumor. I mean, what's the latest scuttlebutt? I don't know. Are they saying anything interesting here? I mean, more higher core counts seem to be coming. Nope, I think increased core counts are common sense that they might try that. I think that they'll add more IP blocks outside of that. Don't underestimate Apple, but also don't overestimate them. That's really all I can say. I don't have a more interesting answer than that. Akarsha Adyathya, I butchered that name for sure, asks, what happened to your video on AMD versus Microsoft? Or am I getting it wrong here? You'll hear a little bit about that with a guest coming up. Not the next one. The next guest is Jimmy Song, which I think will be one of the best episodes this week. But the next guest will probably be someone that has worked with the Xbox APU and worked with it in servers. So there might be some information there. In terms of doing one big video about AMD's relationship to Microsoft, yeah, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I just never got quite the level of confidence in some of the info that's worth doing a video on. But it is interesting to think about Microsoft versus Sony's relationship with AMD, because there was definitely some interesting rumors I heard, but at a certain point, some of them sounded like too much like rumors. And at a certain point, one person I talked to about it, I think is a very untrustworthy person now. So I kind of threw out everything he said. Greg F writes in and asks, is Alder Lake using ring bus or something different? Oh, I believe it's using the ring bus for the big cores. Where did the rumor of always on DRM come from? For Sony, I haven't heard it. I don't know. Not saying that there wasn't something they considered, but I have nothing to say to that. Matthew Johnson writes in, I don't have any questions. I just want you to keep up the good work. Well, I will, Matthew. Thank you for the support. And if you want to ask a question, just remember, if you join the Patreon, feel free to join it and just ask a question right now, for free. Because, thank you for the tip, though. Remember, those resources are there for you. And it's really important to have a consistently growing Patreon, because that's how I plan what we can afford. Like, I want to do a big review of the top Ampere graphics card, which isn't a 3090. I might test the top one, by the way. And it's like doing that type of stuff, even if I don't directly pay for it, like the benchmarking system and stuff, it's hard to plan for upgrades to the channel when the Patreon is all over the place. So just remember that, Matthew. If you support us there, you can It helps us plan for the future, and you get all of this content and ability to ask questions for free. Let me see here. Ani writes in and asks, I guess I'll put this here, a timestamp. So you guys, let's see, DG2. Oni writes in for the Moore's Law's Discord and asks, Tom, do we feel that Intel will be a real GPU competitor and shake up the market? I think the problem with that question is you have to define real. Like, what does a real competitor mean? Do I think Intel will beat the 4090? No. Do I think Intel will probably compete in the lower mid-range at least? I kind of do. And I think if they price it aggressively, that will shake up the market. I don't think this can be emphasized enough that if Intel releases a graphics card that's around the performance of a 3070 or even a 3060, and they charge a cheap price, like let's say they launch just a 3060 competitor, but it's $250 and it has 16 gigabytes of RAM. You cannot tell me that would not shake up the market. And then consider this. How many people buy Ampere for professional workloads? What if, because what I've heard is that mid-range DG2, not even the top chip, encodes like better than top Ampere. Now, most gamers may not care about that, but a lot of people buy the top Ampere chips because of its encoding and other stuff capabilities. That puts downward pricing pressure on the high end of NVIDIA just as much as the gaming performance. That means NVIDIA can't gouge too much because all of the creators will just go Intel. Heck, I would. What if it overperforms? What if Intel releases like a $400 3070 Ti competitor with 16 gigabytes, but then it also renders my videos twice as fast as before? I'm just going Intel because I'm happy with 3070 performance. I just want more RAM and better creator performance. That's what would shake up the market. So do I think it will? Let's wait for more info to come out. You know, let's make sure it's coming out on time. But I think there's so much opportunity for it too. Gaming industry. Any rumors about game studios? I mean, honestly, I haven't paid much attention to that recently. I've thought about reaching out to a couple people, and I probably should. You know, I probably should. It's probably about time I reach out about exclusives again. I leaked the God of War stuff, and you know that Metal Gear Solid's being made at Blue Point, or at least it is. It was. I don't know when it's coming out. You know, in terms of other things, I leaked that Xbox is considering, or should I say, Microsoft's considering making Elder Scrolls Xbox exclusive. I don't know if you guys know that. That was in a recent Broken Silicon. I confirmed that the Bethesda game that I heard may be exclusive was an Elder Scrolls, not the other ones. So, you know, I guess I'll just remind you guys I've said that recently. Outside of that, though, I haven't really looked into it. But you know what? Let me put a note on my calendar to reach out to dev sources again, because it's probably about time people want some of that type of news. For studio gaming. I just cover whatever I'm interested in at the time. It's important for people to put in reader mails and ask these things, you know. Yeah, we'll see if I can dig anything up. Have I had a chance to play Returnal yet? Fucking yikes asks. I have not. I almost bought it twice. I don't know what's stopping me. It got better reviews than I expected. I have not played it yet. I'm kind of waiting for Resident Evil 8, to be honest. I don't know. I might get both. I'm really excited about Resident Evil 8, though. Will Intel gaming GPUs be good at FP64? Probably compared to the other ones, but I haven't really covered that specifically. Any other questions? Let me see. What do you know about Intel's Raptor Lake? It's not one I know as much about actually as some of the later architectures. I think Raptor Lake is kind of like Ivy Bridge to Sandy Bridge. That's how I would think of Raptor Lake. Raptor Lake, think of it like Ivy Bridge to Sandy Bridge, and Sandy Bridge being Alder Lake. So like enhancements, better platforms, better IO, more stable probably, less experimental, and then slight IPC increases in clock speeds. I mean, Raptor Lake will probably be very good. I don't think it's going to really compete with Zen 4 that well, though, honestly. It probably will in gaming, but outside of that, I don't know. What do you? Yeah. So, do I think RDNA 3 will have a higher price over previous generations? Hard to say. We'll see what happens when pricing it meets demand. But I mean, people have proven they'll pay $1,500 or more for a 3090. So I don't know why AMD wouldn't put their top chip up there, especially if they increase performance by 50% or more again. Let me see here. Remember, hit the like button, everybody. We have over 800 people watching now, so it's 800 likes. Nathan Mose asks a question. Will Alder Lake or Zen 4 be worth waiting for in efficiency for laptops at all, or is it just best to get what's here now? Or more accurately, how will Big Little impact efficiency for mobile? Well, I mean, it remains to be seen, first of all. But what I would just say is this, and it's something that I said at the beginning of my last video, which I feel is a little underappreciated. What I would say is, I opened up that video by saying, guys, innovation's coming. If you need something now, get it now. When it comes to laptops, Cezanne's fantastic. Tiger Lake's pretty damn good. I don't think you wait for Alder Lake and Zen 4, because if you do, what about Raptor Lake? What about Meteor Lake? What about Zen 5? I think things are going to be upgrading. Look at Zen 3. So many people, for some reason, thought Zen 3 would just be like 10% better than Zen 2. Wrong. 30% better. In some apps, 50% better in server apps. Zen 3 was a big increase again. Think about that. I think Zen 3 minimum basically per generation, right? That's not to say that I expect the refresh this year from AMD to be that good, because it's not a full generation. But basically, you should expect Zen 4 to be like twice as good as Zen 3. And then Zen 5 to be probably 30% better than that at least. You should expect Alder Lake to be almost as good as Zen 3, Raptor Lake to be better than whatever the refresh is, and Meteor Lake to maybe take it to Zen 4 a bit. These things are getting better and better and better. So, I wouldn't wait. I think Tiger Lake and Cezanne are good enough. That's my advice, though. Let me see here. I won the Newegg Shuffle last week with the 5900X. Super lucky. Yeah, that's when AMD wants you to buy the 5800X or the 5950X. They don't even need to make a lot of 6 cores. So that's honestly why you don't see a lot of 5900Xs. Because why? Why make them? Mosen says, "Hey Tom, Muhammad Al Kawari here, longtime Warsaw Z fan and early supporter. Keep up the good work. Rooting for you." I appreciate the support. I do recognize you there, Muhammad. Intel Evo alternative to ARM M1. I mean, that's basically Alder Lake should beat it, but which topic are we on? I'm kind of late. Yeah. Oh, someone else is typing a question. Let's see, what time is it? Yeah, I'm good to go for another 15 minutes if we get more good questions, but otherwise we'll see. Sure to put them in now, guys. And remember to support the like button, share. Break 3,000. Ethereum is about to break 3,000. I think it's insane, and we could break 5,000 by end of year. That would still, yeah, well, Bitcoin could, I don't want to say how high Bitcoin could get, but I think it could get very high. And it's going to, if you bought Bitcoin instead of Ethereum, you made way more money in the current bull market than you did if you held on to Ethereum. Just remind you that. And in fact, Ethereum's fees are like getting as high as on-chain transactions with Bitcoin, which is ridiculous because you can just use the Lightning Network with Bitcoin. It works great. We're going to explain it with Jimmy Song next week. Like, Lightning Network's quicker than credit cards, and it has 0 fees. Like, I don't know why you would use Ethereum for transactions if the Lightning Network exists. It's ridiculous. Stupid question here. Are AMD or Intel doing research into quantum computing? Well, Jim Keller at Hot Chips 2019 in front of me called quantum computing pixie dust and fanciful magic. So no, I don't think Intel is doing that much research into quantum. I'm sure they say they are, but I don't think so yet. I'm sure they're both looking into it to a certain degree, but no, I don't think they're looking into it as much as other people. And why would they? They're dominating non-quantum. So, you don't want to disrupt yourself that much. For BTC to double, it needs to add $1 trillion. Ethereum just had to add 300 billion to double. Not necessarily. The price will go up in perceived market value without literally putting $1 trillion into it, right? The market cap of a cryptocurrency is just multiplying the theoretical maximum amount of coins by the last price it was sold for. If someone buys one Bitcoin right now for 120,000, it just doubled in market cap. So that's not true, actually. That's not true. That's not how this works. It's much more complex than that. Andrew, I don't know who asked this, but Andrew S says, yes, Iden, they can always make the naming worse at Intel. Oh, yes, they can. You should see some of the crap I'm seeing with how they might name their code names after Raptor Lake, Intel may get full stupid mode with how they name their cores and coves. It's going to be, we'll see. Are YouTubers biased about AMD and NVIDIA? I don't know. I honestly think the amount of bias out there is way overestimated. I think half the time when someone calls someone bias, it's just because they disagreed. Like people were mad I shit on Coffee Lake, but now I say Alder Lake could be good. It's not because I hated Intel or loved AMD. I just thought it was painfully obvious that Zen Plus was half the price and better efficiency than Coffee Lake. So I thought it was better, right? It has nothing to do with bias. I can't speak for other channels, though. Do you get individual leaks of large server purchases in the state of the server market? I'm not going to go into how the information's presented, but what I will say is it's not like I just get sent a leak. Usually, at this point, I've got a key series of contacts at a bunch of companies that I just go to. Basically, sometimes some of them will send me the start of a new leak, but it's never any leak is just a dump of information. Those days are long gone. You know, I'm not a smaller YouTuber or a leaker anymore. Let me see. If AMD keep 20% IPC increase and add TSMC's N6 on top of that, Zen 4 could have a full 40% IPC. Well, that's not really how that works, but and Zen 4 is 5 nanometer, first of all. But I mean, the one thing I would say about IPC increases is this. So if you increase IPC by 20% every year, just do 5 years. 1.2 times 1.2 times 1.2 times 1.2 times 1.2. 5 years of 20% increases is 150% higher IPC. So when people doubt that Lunar Lake will more than double IPC over what we have now, Zen 6 may as well. If you just do 20% IPC increases every year, you're going to get to double pretty quickly anyways. It's just how exponential increases work. Oni writes in, I'm not seeing any tip questions, so I'm just going to go to the people in the Discord. Tom's thoughts on Chagall. Does AMD really, not sure if I said that right, not sure, does AMD really have competition in the Threadripper space? Well, not right now. Let me just put that in. I think some of those leaked roadmaps are bullshit, though, at this point. I think that's painfully obvious. Chagall doesn't look like it is, though. So is this? Yeah, all I can say is I don't have any specific thoughts on it. What I'll say is, from the sounds of it, I don't think AMD's launching a new Threadripper gen. I keep saying this until the end of this year. Like, why? They have no competition. I don't think they need to. I would honestly not be surprised if they waited till Zen 4 to do a new Threadripper. Tom, sorry. Lauravet writes in and says, Tom, do you agree with Dr. Ian Cuttress that Intel should delay Alder Lake until DDR5? No, I don't agree. That simple. Doesn't mean I have a problem with them having that opinion, but I don't agree. No. With all of these IPC increases, Moore's Law isn't dead. Yeah, it is. Moore's Law is doubling transistor counts, not IPC. Moore's Law has been dead for decades. And because people accepted Moore's Law is dead, now we get performance increases with chiplets, IPC again. The problem was that, everyone just thought you could keep doubling transistors. That's not how this works. But now that you don't do that, we are getting performance increases again. But it's not Moore's Law. Moore's Law is dead, people. On a feature base, they want to catch up in GPUs. I don't know. I think AMD's features for their graphics cards aren't very bad. They have a lot of features that I miss moving to NVIDIA. I don't think it's that simple, actually. But I do think that, and I think that they're going to have stuff by the time the next gen comes out anyways. Just looking at some reader mails here. Was Moore's Law truly ever alive? I mean, yeah, 30 years ago it was. Do you think Intel will release an APU as good as the Series X? I mean, eventually, everything happens, but this year? Yeah, I mean, I've heard Sapphire Rapids could have an APU version. I mean, does that count? It's way bigger. I don't understand one person's question here. Let's see here. Are there any other interesting ones I missed? I'm not seeing too many new ones here. Let me double check one thing here too. Was there any new ones on there? Yeah, not seeing any ones there. Dead air. Where is the Bloodborne remake? Where are a lot of things, dude? I would have thought. I mean, again, I think it makes sense that you don't launch the Bloodborne remake right next to Demon Souls, even though Demon Souls is made by Bluepoint, right, and not probably directly by From Software or something. But all I can say is it sounds entirely real. I've had so many people say the Bloodborne remake is real. I just think they're kind of waiting to space it like right in between Demon Souls and Elden Ring. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it came out at the end of this year. Tom, in my opinion, Zen 3 still has lots of issues. It has higher cache latency, higher core-to-core and CCD latency, and is limited to 25 gigabytes per second for 8 cores. AM5 will really help AMD and is needed. Well, one thing at a time, right? Zen 4 will be a lot better. Where's Fallout 5? Where's anything from Bethesda Studios? They take for frickin' ever to make games. Do you think the PS5 has games waiting to be released that they could have already launched? Well, I think if they felt the pressure they felt under the PS3 generation, it wouldn't surprise me if some other games that have already been announced would be out by now, right? I just don't think they feel any urgency yet, but I think they're starting to feel the urgency. I would have to assume Sony's starting to feel the urgency now. They just didn't, right, at the beginning of this gen. But you're starting to see Xbox really prove that they're here to stay and that they're going to compete with Sony heavily. So I have to assume Sony's not screwing around anymore. Or at least they better not be, or they're going to wake up in 2 years and they might be losing some market share. But right now, they're not. Do I think RDNA 3 will be 2.5x RDNA 2? No. I don't. Could it be? Hey, I'm not putting out any RDNA 3 leaks yet for a reason, but I don't think so. I don't understand this 2.5x too. It's like I already said RDNA 2 would double RDNA 1, and for some AMD fanboys, that wasn't good enough for some reason. I don't know why some people just can't be happy with whatever. It's like that's a good enough increase in and of itself. So many questions about PS5 exclusives. That's funny. I have nothing really to say about that yet, but maybe I'll look into it. Not enough people are using the PS5 versus PS4s yet, so Sony doesn't care to release the games. I don't know if it's that simple, but I mean, yeah, I will say that. What is the urgency when they're selling every console they release, right? Every console they make sells instantly. So it's like, do they need more games? They're selling them. What I would say is they definitely want a bunch of games before they meet demand, because you don't want to meet demand and then have all the other people there going, yeah, I don't care anymore. That's the one thing I would say, is that if I'm Sony, I would definitely want this demand to never go away, because it's making them so much money. And that's the funny thing I've heard someone say too, is how pissed Sony is that they didn't make twice as many consoles. Like, how pissed must you be with the knowledge? It's a good problem to have, but how pissed must Sony be knowing that if they made twice as many consoles, they'd sell right away? And do we know how big the install base is? Yeah, I think that just came out. It's outselling the PS4. 1 times 3. Yeah. Someone points out that Hardware Unboxed had the same IPC as the 5700 XT. You know, when you run the 6700 XT at the same clock speeds as the 5700 XT, they get the same performance, you know, and that is worth pointing out when thinking about RDNA 3. I think RDNA 3 will bring real IPC increases, most likely, though. At the very least, scale core counts to a point where it's very powerful. I guess I'll say that. Do I think the 3080 Ti is stupid? It's not out yet. I will say, if they I mean, look, if they charge $1,200, I think it's kind of a dumb thing to buy over a 6800 or 6900 XT. I'll say that. But if it were less than that, I don't know. I think there's a specific person that will buy the 3080 Ti, and I think they will buy them in droves. So I don't think it matters if I think it's good anymore, unfortunately. What is the longest you think GPUs can stay above MSRP, assuming crypto prices remain constant? Um, Guys, it's not just the crypto. It isn't. Stop. 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 It's not just crypto making prices up. Gamers are causing this demand. The shortages in all power components are causing the shortage. Like, it's not mining. It's not, if mining goes away, everything's fixed. Not true. At least not for AMD graphics cards. For Nvidia, there's a lot of evidence they're shipping a shit ton of them to miners. So, but that's Nvidia's choice to do that. You know, how long do I think GPUs will stay above MSRP? Well, the thing is, AIBs want to charge more than MSRP. So even if things came in stock, I think for a little bit, AIBs would just insist on keeping prices high without any demand issues. The question becomes, when will graphics cards just start staying in stock at Best Buy, whether the reference Founders editions for Ampere or at AMD's website for their cards? Once those are consistently in stock, AIBs will probably blink and lower prices. You know, but that's probably not happening. Again, I'm not putting money on when that happens yet, because people just freak out if it's off at all. When will secondhand prices for the Ryzen 5 3600 come down? Whenever Zen 3 is readily in stock, and it almost is. You know, that's when. Oni says, have a beer, you look tired. You know, instead of going and getting a beer, I think I would just end it. So I'll wait here for another 5 minutes. Unless, you know, to see if we get any more tipped questions. But if we don't, then I think it's been a pretty good live stream so far. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to. It's been a slower month anyways, but SJ Kakarot says inflation from the stimulus may drive up cost. Yeah, I mean, guys, there's inflation right now from a bunch of things, including the stimulus. I mean, guys, I think I read that the U.S. money supply was increased by 50% last year. That's going to cause inflation. Again, we're going to talk about it on the next Broken Silicon, actually. So I would, you know, look for the next Broken Silicon. Like, if you want to talk about crypto and inflation, that's the one to listen to. It's really good. Zach Miklos writes in and asks, is it true that Battlefield 6 will be on PS5 and XS only? I would assume so. I guess I guess I never thought about if they would even put Battlefield 6 on the PS4. I don't think it will be. I think it's going to be next gen only. Any wisdom of the week could be anything, really. No. Not really. Which GPU is that on top of the 3070 box? I think it's a broken 470. Yeah. Yeah, this is an old 470 that I think got shorted or something and broke in a mining rig like 4 years ago. Which is something I had in my guest room at my old house, the Hall of Fallen graphics cards. What you might see, what you're probably going to see once I'm done setting this up, is a long row of testing stations, but then there will be the Hall of Fallen graphics cards over here too. How does the dog like the new place? Oh, she loves it. She loves the new place. It has a bigger yard than before, so she's still a little nervous though. Being here because it's so different than what she's used to. Do you really think by 2025 Apple M4 will be much better than Intel Lunar Lake? Do I really think? I don't think I ever said that. I like this question. Let me write that down. The Stooniverse writes in and says, "Are you going to go full Joe Rogan and trash your old hometown while praising your new one?" No, I liked living in Peoria. I have good things to say. I think the standard of living there for the price is incredible. If you live in downtown Peoria Heights, some of the best restaurants I've ever had. Real sleeper for how good the restaurants are in Peoria. No, I'm not trashing Peoria. And I love the people there too. You know, you got the headquarters of Caterpillar. You've got, I think, Komatsu's there, a few other companies. I guess not technically the headquarters of Caterpillar, but effectively it is. No, there's a lot of good, hardworking people there that are well-educated. It's a good place to live. It's just, you know, it was time to come here. I think Joe Rogan, too, isn't so much trashing LA as he is trashing the current state of LA. No more puppers and videos. I wouldn't say that. Reese can get up here. She's just downstairs sleeping on the bed. On a bed. John Deere. Well, John Deere's in Iowa, guys. Am I going to set the signature tech shelf in the background similar to Hardware Unboxed or Gamers Nexus? I'm not so sure I am, actually. We'll see. I kind of expect this to be a little different looking than other places. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other nice question, Cade. I don't see Cade here. Get a green screen and just roll videos of the dog in the background. Your mom's attic looks great. No. My parents live in Minnesota. All right, guys. I'm starting to have people ask questions about different coolers and things that have already been asked before. I'm not seeing any tipped questions. So I think that's going to just about do it for this video. Geez, some of these questions that get blocked by YouTube are ridiculous. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like it. Hundreds, you know, there's over 700, over 800 people watching during most of it. Hit the like button, guys. You know, it really does help with the algorithm a lot. Remember to watch the last leak. I mean, it actually bothers me quite a bit how few people watched the Zen 3 Plus and 4700S debunking video. That was a lot of effort. And as always, the Patreon, I don't know, there's been horrible problems with funding the past month from YouTube, and Patreon's had a weird cycle this time. So remember to support us on Patreon if you have the extra money. You'll get access to Broken Silicon early and ad-free. You can ask guest questions. You can vote on the subjects. You can talk with people in the Discord, talk with me in the Discord. I mean, There's an exclusive podcast, Die Shrink, where there's so much content out there without ads. And if we grow the Patreon enough, the goal is to launch early versions of videos without any ads to the patrons too. Like, that's what we're trying to work towards if we can afford it. So remember to support us. We really do need the support right now with the current version of an adpocalypse. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Have a fantastic week, everybody. And thanks to all those who support. All right.